So today we're going to cover a few things that you should be doing in your hives and considering around August, September. First and foremost is mites. You're going to want to get a good read on your mite situation. I recommend testing before and after treatments. You can use something like this kit from the University of Minnesota. We also have the Varroa Easy Check. With that, you can use a few methods. You can use a sugar roll, CO2, or an alcohol wash. The alcohol wash is going to give you the best, most accurate results on your mite count. So I do recommend going for that. You will have to sacrifice 200 to 300 bees, but overall it's for the betterment of the colony. So once you've got your mite count, the next step will be to choose a mite treatment. There are two things you want to consider when picking a mite treatment. The first is temperature. Some of these products have an upper temperature limit. Take Formic Pro, for example. That product has an upper limit of 84 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything above that is real harsh on the bees, and you risk burning out your hive. Contact-based miticides, though, such as HopGuard, Apivar, or Viroxan if you're outside of California, those have no upper temperature limit, so you're free to use those. Which brings me to my second point, which is you want to consider whether or not you have honey supers on the hive. If you do, you want to use a treatment that's approved for use with honey supers. That would be something like HopGuard, Viroxan outside of California, or even Formic Pro, but again, be mindful of that upper temperature limit. And you know, the reason why it's so important to treat for mites at this time of year, your bees are raising their winter brood, and those are the bees that are going to carry them through the winter. So you really want them to be coming out strong and healthy. And by getting your mite counts as low as possible, you're really going to help them out in getting through the winter. September is a good time to evaluate your hive. You can get in there and take stock of their stored resources, their population. You know, if they don't have a lot of honey stored, you might consider supplemental feeding with something like ProSweet. You can use it in conjunction with Pro Health. That'll really help them to take it down. If you get in there and their population is looking low, you might want to consider combining them with a stronger hive. You know, it's better to go into winter with one really strong hive than a weak hive and an okay hive. If you do end up having a surplus of stored honey, by all means take it for yourself. If you don't know how much to leave, we always recommend reaching out to your local bee club, joining them. It's a great way to get connected with an experienced beekeeper that can give you some guidance on how best to get your bees through the winter. So if you do end up pulling honey for yourself, the first thing you'll want to do is clear your supers of bees. A couple ways you can go about that. This right here is an escape screen, basically a one-way valve for bees. You will place it screen facing down underneath the super you wish to harvest. And over the course of 24 hours, the bees are going to head down through this hole, through the screen, and they're going to have a hard time finding their way back up. If you do come back to your super and find some bees still on the frames, you can always use a bee brush to get them off. Now, if you have multiple hives and time is more of a concern, then you can clear them in a few minutes using something like this solar fume board. You'd use this in conjunction with a repellent like Honey Robber or Honey Bandit, basically squirting an X formation, placing it on the hive like so to allow air to move through and help it fumigate. And as the sun beats down on this board, it's going to heat up that repellent and help fumigate the super. Just remove it once you're done, and you should be good to pull your frames. So now that your supers are clear, there's a couple of methods you can use to harvest your honey. The first being the crush and strain method. That involves scraping the wax and the honey together off of your foundation and into a filter bag. At that point, you would squeeze or crush that honey and wax together. The filter bag will separate your wax from your honey, and there you have it. The other method you can use is using an extractor. Basically, you're going to cut the wax cappings off of the cells, place your frames in the extractor, and spin that honey out. I prefer this method personally. It preserves the comb. You can give it back to the bees, and it's going to save them that much more time and energy so that next season they can go right into filling those cells, and you'll end up with a bigger yield. Whichever way you decide to go, I would recommend letting your honey sit for 1 to 2 days before bottling. This just gives it time to allow air bubbles to rise to the top, as well as any wax particles. If you've ever seen a layer of foam at the top of a jar of honey, this step will help to prevent that. And you know, whether it's going to be sold at a farmer's market, given away to friends or family, or just kept for yourself, we have a large selection of jars and custom labels to suit your needs. Last of all, I'd like to touch on the subject of pests and robbing. At this point in the year, we're getting closer to winter, and that means there's going to be less and less forage available, and that's going to drive competition up, not only from other bees, but from other things like wasps and yellow jackets. There are a couple ways to combat this. First off, I would recommend using an entrance reducer. This is just going to give the bees less space to defend and make it easier for them to keep other invaders out. If you want to step it up a notch, you could use something like this robbing screen. Sits on the front of your hive like so. You'll strap it on there, and there'll be entrances here for the bees to go through, and you can open these and close these as you wish. Last of all, you could hang up some yellow jacket or wasp traps just for an added layer of protection. Thanks for joining us for the September edition of the Beekeepers Buzz. If you found any of this information helpful, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.